Part 1. The Seal Jar. It began with a jar. Alice Carter had never believed in curses, spirits, or anything beyond the physical. At 33, she was a successful antique dealer, rational to the core. Her store, Timeless Finds, nestled in the heart of Maine, was known for its collection of rare, often obscure artifacts. Alice had traveled far and wide to uncover treasures buried in dust, rot, and neglect. On a gray October morning, she received a peculiar phone call. "Miss Carter?" A raspy voice croaked on the line. "There's something I think you'll want to see. It's at the Ramsey estate, up in Hollow Creek." Alice paused. Hollow Creek was a forgotten town, nearly wiped off the map after a mine collapse decades ago. "What is it you have?" "A jar. It won't open." She nearly hung up right there. But something in the caller's tone, a blend of fear and urgency, made her reconsider. By noon, she was driving through fog-draped hills, the trees skeletal in their autumn bareness. The Ramsey estate was exactly what she expected, sprawling, decayed, and reeking of mildew. An elderly man met her at the door, gaunt and pale, his eyes darting like he was being watched. He said only one thing before leading her to the basement. "No one has opened it. No one should." In a corner of the cobweb-laced cellar, resting atop a stone pedestal, sat the jar. It was larger than she expected, maybe the size of a large melon, crafted from dark ceramic clay that shimmered faintly in the low light. Strange etchings ran across its body in uneven spiraling rows. Its lid, made of a dull metal, was secured with something like wax or resin hardened over time. Despite its age, the jar was perfectly intact. "What's the asking price?" Alice asked. The man looked at her like she'd just offered to dig up a corpse. "Take it. Just take it away." Back at her apartment, Alice set the jar on her desk. For hours she examined it, its etchings, the texture of the seal, the odd weight distribution. The markings didn't match any known script she'd seen before. Not Latin, not Greek, not Egyptian. It felt wrong, as if the symbols didn't want to be read. She tried every method to open the lid, prying, soaking, even freezing it to make the metal contract. Nothing worked. Not even a hairline crack appeared. It was as though the lid was fused to the body by some invisible force. That night, she dreamt of a long hallway. The floor was lined with black tiles, slick with blood. At the end of the corridor sat the jar on a pedestal, bathed in flickering candlelight. She walked toward it, heart racing, until a voice whispered in her ear, "Don't open it." Alice jerked awake, gasping. Her bedroom was freezing. The windows were shut, yet a cold draft touched her skin like unseen fingers. From the corner of her room, the jar sat silently on a table, reflecting the moonlight. She stared at it for a long time. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. Electronics malfunctioned around the jar. Her phone refused to work when near it. Her computer crashed twice. One of her store's security cameras went static for hours while pointed in its direction. Customers at Timeless Finds commented on the chill in the air, though the heater was running. One woman stopped mid-step, turned pale, and pointed at the jar inside the glass display. "That thing is not right," she muttered before leaving. Alice began hearing things at night. Faint whispering, scratching. Once a sound like nails tapping glass echoed from the kitchen. But when she checked, there was nothing. The dreams worsened. Now she stood in a room of mirrors. Each reflection showed a version of herself, but each one wore a terrified expression, backing away from her. The jar floated in the air behind her, lid spinning ever so slightly, and the whisper returned, stronger now. "You opened it." She woke with blood in her nose. One evening, her friend and fellow collector, James Holloway, visited. "What is this, Alice?" he asked, examining the jar with narrowed eyes. "I picked it up from a collector in Hollow Creek. Said no one could open it." James frowned. "This thing feels oppressive." He leaned closer to the markings. "This is pre-language, maybe Neolithic. These symbols aren't meant to be read. They're meant to contain." "That's what I thought," Alice muttered. James's brow furrowed. "Why are you keeping it in your apartment?" She shrugged, though uneasily. "I don't know. I keep trying to get rid of it, but it's like I can't. Every time I try to move it back to the shop, something happens. Flat tires, sudden migraines. Last time I passed out at the front door with it in my hands." James leaned back, visibly disturbed. "Alice, this might be an apotropaic vessel. Ancient cultures sometimes trapped spirits or curses inside objects, then sealed them with binding rituals. Breaking that seal could release whatever's inside. Alice laughed nervously. You mean I've got a ghost in a jar? James didn't laugh. Maybe worse. 2 nights later, it happened. Alice woke to the sound of the lid clicking. She sat upright in bed, the room cloaked in shadows. Her heart pounded. The jar was still on the table, but the lid was moving. Just a twitch, a subtle rotation, then stillness. She approached cautiously, phone light in hand. The markings on the jar were glowing faintly like embers in dying ash. Whispering filled the air, indecipherable and layered, like dozens of voices talking over one another. The room grew cold, breath puffing from her mouth. Then bang! A cabinet door slammed behind her. Alice spun, but nothing was there. When she turned back, the jar was exactly as it had been. Lid unmoved, silent, dark. By morning, Alice had made a decision. She called a specialist, Dr. Marcus Hale, a retired folklore professor known for his work in ancient containment rituals. She'd read his papers. The man was brilliant, though a recluse. When he arrived, the first thing he did was refuse to touch the jar. He observed it from across the room, lips pursed. You don't open things like this, Miss Carter. You bury them. I didn't open it, she insisted. But it's waking up, Dr. Hale nodded. This isn't just an object. It's a prison, and something inside is aware of you now. Alice was trembling. Why me? Because you disturbed it, brought it back into the world. Things like this draw energy from attention, obsession, and proximity. The longer it stays with you, the stronger it becomes. What's inside? Dr. Hale hesitated. There's a story, he began, of a jar created by an ancient sect to contain what they called the Weeper, a grief entity born from human suffering, tragedy, and mourning. It possessed the ability to drive people mad, to feed on their sadness. The sect sealed it after it wiped out an entire village. Alice was silent. Dr. Hale continued. They didn't destroy it because it couldn't be destroyed, only contained and hidden. But it found me. No, you found it. That night, she made one last attempt. Alice packed the jar into a wooden crate, layered it with thick cloth, and drove to a remote forest. She planned to bury it far from civilization. But halfway there, her vision blurred. The radio began to emit static. Her fingers went numb on the wheel. The world warped. Trees stretched unnaturally, and the road seemed endless. She blinked, and suddenly she was back in her apartment. The jar sat on her kitchen table, unmoved, untouched, waiting. She broke down. Sobbing on the floor, Alice realized she was trapped. The jar had latched onto her, physically, mentally, spiritually. It wouldn't leave. Couldn't be thrown away. Burned, drowned. Nothing would work. And worse, it was beginning to open itself. She saw the lid move again that night. Only this time, a faint black mist curled out from the edges. In the shadows of her hallway, she saw something watching her. A tall, thin figure, head tilted, weeping softly. She called Dr. Hale one last time. His voice trembled over the line. We have to act before it fully awakens. If the lid comes off completely, it won't go back in. What do I do? Meet me at the place it was found. Tomorrow, we'll try to bind it again. It may be the only chance. Alice agreed. She hung up and looked at the jar. The lid was shivering. Part 2. Voices Beneath the Lid. If the lid comes off completely, it won't go back in. Those words echoed in Alice Carter's mind as she drove toward Hollow Creek the next morning. The jar secured in the trunk of her car, though the word secured felt like a lie. Nothing could truly contain it now. Fog clung to the hills like a living thing, thick and suffocating. The sky was a flat, ashen gray, devoid of birds, sound, or movement. Beside her in the passenger seat lay an old leather-bound journal that Dr. Marcus Hale had given her, notes from a previous containment attempt, scribbled by a monk who died during the ritual. The final page had been torn out. Hale said it was missing. Alice had a sinking feeling that wasn't entirely true. She pulled up to the Ramsey estate, now even more decrepit than before. The windows were black holes, the shutters hanging crooked. Hale was already there, waiting near the stone pedestal in the basement where she'd first found the jar. He didn't greet her. His eyes were sunken, like he hadn't slept in days. You brought it, he said hoarsely. Alice nodded, carrying the crate down the rotting steps. I haven't slept, she admitted. I keep hearing it, crying, sometimes laughing. I think it's showing me things. Dr. Hale didn't flinch. It's feeding off you. The Weeper preys on unresolved grief, personal sorrow, fear. That's how it breaks free. Alice stiffened. So what now? He motioned toward a circle of salt and ash he'd drawn on the cellar floor, surrounded by ancient glyphs. We bind it again, but it requires blood. Your blood. It's your bond to it that makes this possible. Alice swallowed. And if I say no? He looked at her grimly. Then it opens, and everyone in a 100-mile radius might start hearing voices in the dark. They began the ritual just before dusk. Dr. Hale instructed Alice to sit cross-legged within the circle, the jar placed directly in front of her. He stood outside the ring, chanting in an ancient dialect, one that made Alice's skin crawl with each syllable. The jar began to vibrate. The metal lid twisted slowly. Mist seeped from the tiny cracks, coiling through the air like smoke searching for lungs to invade. Focus, Hale warned. Don't listen to it. But Alice already was. Voices filled her head. Familiar ones. Her mother, who died 10 years ago. Her sister, gone from a sudden illness. Her father, whose suicide left a void no time could ever heal. Why didn't you help me, Alice? You left us. You let us die. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she fought to stay present. The jar pulsed with dark light now. The lid twisted sharply and cracked. A jagged sound like a bone breaking echoed through the basement. Wind whooshed inward, into the jar, not out, dragging dust, light, and warmth with it. Dr. Hale's voice rose in urgency. Give me your hand! Alice reached out. He took a small knife and made a shallow cut across her palm. Blood dripped onto the jar, and the symbols along its body flared crimson. The whispering crescendoed into screams. And then everything stopped. The jar froze. The lid went still. The mist recoiled and slithered back inside. For a moment, the room was silent. Alice collapsed, breath heaving. But Dr. Hale wasn't celebrating. He was staring at the jar. At the lid, it hadn't sealed. It wasn't enough, he said quietly. The bond is too strong. Alice lay on the cold ground trying to catch her breath. What does that mean? It means you're not just its victim. You're its host. She blinked. Host? Hale grimaced. Something in your past, a trauma. It created a void and the weeper has latched onto it. You're a doorway now. Alice felt her stomach turn. You said we could rebind it. I thought we could. Hale rubbed his temples, but it's already rooted itself. It's no longer just in the jar. It's inside you. She stared at the vessel. The markings no longer glowed, but the metal lid now had a crack running across its surface like a single, ominous fracture in reality. I should have left it there, she whispered. I never should have touched it. Back at her apartment that night, the real horror began. Alice barely made it home before the hallucination started. Faces appeared in every reflective surface. Windows, mirrors, even the glass of picture frames. Some were familiar. Some were twisted mockeries of people she once knew. They all spoke in unison. Let us out! The air grew thicker with every hour. Lights dimmed on their own. Doors creaked open without wind. And the jar, resting once again on her desk, began ticking. A soft, rhythmic sound. Tick, tick, tick. Like a clock counting down to something terrible. Alice tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she was back in the mirror room. Dozens of versions of herself, all screaming. She awoke to find words written across her bathroom mirror in steam. You belong to us. The next morning, she found a photo on her phone. It showed her sleeping in bed, but she hadn't taken it. Worse, there was a dark figure standing in the corner of the room, weeping silently. She confronted Dr. Hale. You didn't tell me the whole story. He looked haunted. I didn't know how bad it was, but I think I understand now. He showed her a page he'd recovered from a separate archive, something even older than his original notes. It described a failed binding from the 1800s. A woman, much like Alice, had discovered the jar and brought it home. Within days, she began to unravel. She saw the dead, heard voices, and eventually vanished without a trace. The jar was later found, sealed again. They say the weeper consumes its host when fully released, Hale explained, and then seals itself back inside, waiting. Alice swallowed. So I'm next. Not if we finish the ritual. I thought we already tried, Hale nodded. We did. But the true seal requires confronting what the weeper has attached itself to, your deepest sorrow. You'll have to go inside. Alice blinked. Inside? He placed a small obsidian shard in her hand. This will take you into its domain, a realm built from your grief. If you survive, you can weaken it, maybe even reseal it. But if you lose yourself there, you mean I die. He didn't respond. That night she lit candles around the jar, sat in the salt circle again, and held the shard tightly. Dr. Hale stood ready with the ritual scroll, eyes sharp, voice steady. "Are you ready?" "No," she said honestly, "but I have to do it." He began to chant. The room darkened unnaturally. A vortex formed above the jar, spiraling with shadow. The air trembled. The shard in Alice's hand grew hot, then icy, then vanished in a flash of black light. Her vision collapsed inward. Alice opened her eyes in the hallway from her dreams. Black tiles, red stains, at the far end, the jar. But everything here was wrong. Time didn't exist. The walls breathed, the air wept, faces floated in the darkness, watching her, whispering. She walked slowly, each step heavy. Images flashed around her, moments from her life. Her mother's funeral, her father's final message, her sister dying in a hospital bed. The memories twisted, distorted. Her mother blamed her. Her sister screamed. Her father laughed. They weren't real. She pressed on. When she reached the jar, it was open, empty, and behind it stood herself, or something that looked like her. A shadow version, eyes hollow, mouth stretched unnaturally wide. "You kept me inside," it said. Alice shook her head. "You're not me." The shadow lunged, shrieking. But instead of fighting, Alice did something unexpected. She stepped forward and embraced it. The thing wailed, its form unraveling, leaking sorrow like smoke. "You're the grief I never faced," Alice whispered, "but I'm not afraid of you anymore." The jar behind her began to glow. The lid rose and hovered, and then it sealed itself. The world cracked, and everything went white. Alice awoke on the floor of her apartment, Dr. Hale kneeling over her. "You did it," he whispered. She sat up. The jar sat on her table again. The lid was whole, untouched. The markings were dull, silent, no ticking, no voices. For the first time in weeks, the room felt warm. Later, she wrapped the jar in thick cloth, placed it inside a locked case, and drove to the deepest part of Hollow Creek's woods. She buried it beneath stones, marked the place with a simple sigil, and walked away. But as she drove home, her radio hissed. Then, just before it turned to static, a voice whispered softly, "Thank you." Part 3. The Last Twist. 2 weeks had passed since Alice Carter sealed the jar. The whispering had stopped. The mirrors in her apartment no longer reflected twisted faces. The shadows in the hallway were just shadows again. For the first time in months, she could breathe without feeling watched. She was free, or so she believed. Alice resumed her work at Timeless Finds, cautiously optimistic that the worst was behind her. The shop had suffered during her ordeal. Dusty shelves, a backlog of appraisals, and several messages from confused clients. But the normalcy felt like a blessing. Dr. Marcus Hale remained in contact, though he was clearly shaken by the experience. They met once a week at a quiet cafe near the coast. On their last visit, he'd said something that clung to Alice's mind like a thorn. Just because it's sealed doesn't mean it's gone. She wanted to believe otherwise, that the jar, now buried deep in the Hollow Creek woods beneath stones and protective symbols, was truly dormant, forgotten, powerless. But some things don't stay buried. It began with a crack. Not in the jar, but in her bathroom mirror. One morning, brushing her teeth, Alice noticed a tiny fracture at the top corner of the glass. Hairline thin. She hadn't dropped anything. She hadn't even touched it. Still, she thought little of it, until it grew longer the next day. By the end of the week, the mirror looked like it had been struck by something invisible. The lines spiderwebbed outward from a central point, which strangely was the reflection of her face. Then came the dreams. Back in the hallway, the black tile, the blood. But this time the jar wasn't at the end. She was, tied to the pedestal, mouth sewn shut, eyes open, weeping silently. She woke screaming. She rushed to see Dr. Hale that morning, desperate and trembling. "I thought it was over," she said. "I did everything you said." He looked older, more tired than ever. "It's possible that you didn't bury the source." "What do you mean?" "The weeper attaches itself to grief, but it doesn't die with the vessel. It adapts, it learns, it survives. I think it may have left part of itself in you." Alice backed away, voice shaking. "I faced it. I embraced it. It was gone." "You faced a fragment," Hale corrected. "But now it's trying something new. A different host. A new form." He pulled a thick book from his bag. More handwritten notes, some from his own observations, others from forgotten accounts. One phrase was circled repeatedly. "The weeper never truly dies. It trades pain for pain." Alice blinked. Pain for pain? Hale nodded grimly. It needs sorrow to live. And if your sorrow isn't enough anymore, it'll create new sorrow, new loss. That night she received a phone call. Her ex-boyfriend, Evan, someone she hadn't spoken to in nearly a year, had been in a car accident. He didn't survive. She hadn't loved him. Not truly, but she had cared. And somehow the jar knew that. It escalated quickly. A neighbor found their cat strangled in the alley. An old woman Alice once helped at her shop was found dead in her home, her face frozen in terror. People around her, however distantly connected, were starting to die. The police questioned her, but she had no answers, no connections, no motive, no evidence. She returned to the woods, to the place she buried the jar, but it wasn't there. The stones had been scattered. The dirt was fresh. There was a hole in the ground, and a single message etched into the earth with a finger. You sealed the wrong door. She called Hale in a panic. Someone dug it up, she cried. The jar's gone. He was silent for a long time. Then, almost reluctantly, he said, I think I know who took it. He explained that long ago there was another man, his predecessor in folklore studies, Professor Douglas Varn. Obsessed with containment objects, Varn had been dismissed from the university after attempting an unauthorized ritual on a sealed artifact. He believed that such objects didn't hold evil, but truth, buried emotions too pure, too raw for the living to bear. Hale had long suspected Varn was looking for the Weeper. He must have followed us, Hale said, or found it some other way. If he's trying to unlock it again. Alice's voice cracked. Then this starts all over. No, Hale said, then it ends, one way or another. They found Varn's hideout deep in the New Hampshire mountains, a crumbling lodge overrun with ivy and rot. Inside, the walls were covered with scribbled diagrams, old texts, candles, and jars. Dozens of jars. But only one sat at the center of the main room, on a blood-stained table, surrounded by symbols drawn in ash, the Weeper's jar. It was open, and the lid lay on the floor, cracked completely in half. Varn stood nearby, barefoot, swaying, tears streaming down his face. It's beautiful, he whispered when Alice entered. So much sadness, so much truth. His eyes were completely white, his skin pale as bone. It showed me everything, he continued, stepping toward them. Everything you buried, Alice. Hale raised a small blade, trying to draw a protection circle, but Varn moved faster, inhumanly fast. He struck Hale across the face and sent him sprawling. Alice screamed and backed away, but something rose behind Varn. A shadow, lanky, weeping. The Weeper. Its long black arms reached down and embraced Varn. He collapsed instantly, eyes burning out of his skull. A black mist flowed from his mouth into the jar, now gaping wide like a hungry maw. Alice ran to Hale's side. He was bleeding but alive. We can't fight it, he gasped. We have to close it. How? She cried. Same as before, he said, but not with blood, with sacrifice. He looked her dead in the eyes. One of us has to go in and stay. Alice stared at the jar. It was howling now, a vortex of screams and smoke swirling from its mouth. The Weeper hovered above it, dozens of faces flashing across its shifting form. Her mother, her sister, Evan, Varn, all of them weeping. She stepped forward. No, Hale shouted. It'll consume you. I'm the reason it woke, she said. I opened the door. I have to close it. She looked at him, tears in her eyes. Tell the world to stop chasing these things. They're not meant for us. Then she stepped into the mist. The Weeper opened its arms, and Alice vanished inside the jar. Everything went silent. The mist recoiled. The jar glowed white, pulsing before the lid cracked moments ago reformed itself in a flash of heat and light and sealed shut. Dr. Hale crawled forward and touched it. Cold, heavy, silent. He wept. Months passed. The jar now rests deep in a government archive, sealed behind layers of concrete and incantation, under the watch of men who no longer ask questions. Dr. Hale retired, but not before he wrote one final entry in his journal. She didn't die. Not truly. She's in there, keeping it contained. But for how long, I can't say. If you're reading this and you find the jar, don't open it. Not again. And late at night, when the wind is still and the room is dark, if you listen closely to the jar's cold surface, you can still hear someone crying. The end.